When I started dating, my dad gave me some advice that stuck with me over the years. He said, "Son, a man of value doesn't tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or dishonesty from anyone, especially not from a partner. Always stay true to who you are and hold on to your worth." Those words have guided me ever since. That's why, when I found myself sitting down with my wife, Sophia, I reminded myself to stay grounded, even though I knew what I had to say wasn't going to go over well. "Sophia," I began, keeping my voice steady, "there's been a change of plans. The merger meeting got moved up, and I have to fly out first thing tomorrow morning. I won't be back until late Sunday night. I know this wedding is a big deal, especially with you being the maid of honor, but I just got promoted to CFO. Missing this meeting isn't an option, not for the company and definitely not for our future. I'm really sorry." Her reaction was immediate and sharp. "Are you kidding me? We've been planning this for months, and now you're bailing at the last minute. I'm going to have to go alone. Do you know how humiliating that'll be for me? Can't someone else handle this meeting instead of you?" I tried to explain, though I could already see the frustration in her eyes. "Sophia, this isn't just any meeting. This deal is worth over $2 billion, and I've been leading the project for the past year. Nobody else can step in for me, it's my responsibility. A lot of people's livelihoods are tied to making this work. I get why you're upset, and I promise I'll make it up to you. The bonus from this deal will help us both, but right now, there's no other choice. I'll be home by Sunday." She was livid. After that, the conversation completely shut down. She refused to talk to me for the rest of the night and even told me to sleep in the guest room. That coldness, that distance, it was so unlike her, and it caught me off guard. I tried to reason with her, to help her see my perspective, but she wasn't having it. Eventually, I gave up, packed for my trip, and spent the night alone in the guest room. I knew how much this wedding meant to her. Her best friend, Charlotte, had been through hell and back. Her ex-husband cheated on her while she was battling a serious illness, then left because he couldn't handle her slow recovery. It shattered Charlotte, and even after she miraculously recovered, she had to fight her way through years of depression. Despite the support from friends and family, nothing seemed to lift her spirits, until the day she met Matthew in a grocery store. That moment changed everything. Her world became brighter, and Matthew quickly became the center of it. Their wedding was more than just a celebration, it was a symbol of Charlotte's resilience and her new beginning. Sophia had been by her side through all of it, so being the maid of honor was a deeply personal honor. I understood why canceling last minute hurt her, but I couldn't change the situation. I figured I'd have to face the music and make things up to her once I got back. The next morning, I tried to say goodbye before heading out, but the bedroom door was locked. I called out that I loved her and promised to check in as soon as I landed, but there was no response. With a heavy heart, I walked out to the waiting car, feeling awful about leaving things the way they were. After 19 years of marriage, I thought Sophia would understand why this was necessary, but it seemed like I'd miscalculated. I called her before my flight, but she didn't answer, so I left a voicemail apologizing again. I sent a text before takeoff, then another when I landed in Italy, but still nothing. I knew she was angry, and I'd need to put in serious effort to win her back. With no other options, I called our twin daughters, Brooke and Avery, who were away at college. I explained the situation and asked them to check in on their mom. They promised to look out for her, and I felt a little better knowing they had her back. Brooke and Avery had always been Daddy's girls, and I appreciated them more than I could say. When I arrived in Italy, I checked into my hotel and called my CEO, only to be blindsided by some unexpected news: the meeting had been cancelled. The other company's CEO had a family emergency, and everything was postponed. The moment I heard that, I booked the first direct flight back to Philadelphia International. If I timed it right, I could make it to the wedding reception by 9 p.m. It was cutting it close, but I hoped showing up might help smooth things over with Sophia. After landing, I picked up a rental car and let the GPS guide me straight to the venue. It was a little past 9 when I arrived, and the place was alive with energy. Music blasted from the speakers, people were on the dance floor, drinks flowed freely, and the laughter echoed through the hall. It was clear everyone was enjoying themselves, some a little too much. Despite the long hours of travel, I felt a sense of relief just being there. I made my way to the bar, ordered a double bourbon, and began scanning the room for Sophia. It wasn't easy to spot her in a crowd of over 200 people. As I sipped my drink and searched, a wave of memories swept over me. Sophia and I have been together for 19 years, but when we met, she was 5 years older and fresh out of a rough divorce. Her ex-husband, Dr. Daniel Walker, had cheated on her with a nurse during his residency, leaving her devastated both emotionally and financially. She was working as a waitress back then, scraping by to make ends meet, yet there was something about her, something resilient, something special, that drew me in. Over the years, we built a life together. We raised our twin daughters, Brooke and Avery, with all the love and care we could give. Sophia always valued how honest and loyal I was, and she often said she admired me for being so steadfast. We'd had countless conversations about the importance of trust and commitment in a marriage, and I'd always respected her decision to leave her unfaithful ex. That strength was one of the things I loved most about her. I thought our bond was unshakable. And then I saw her. Sophia was sitting at a table, chatting with none other than Daniel, her ex-husband. I knew he was friends with Charlotte, but seeing him here, without his wife, caught me off guard. I stayed where I was for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. They seemed comfortable, too comfortable, given their past. Before I could move closer, Sophia stood up, reached for his hand, and led him to the dance floor. She looked stunning in her ivory dress, and I told myself it was probably just a harmless dance. But as one slow song transitioned into another, my unease grew. Something about the way she moved, the way she smiled at him, it wasn't right. I could tell she'd been drinking. Normally, a few drinks made her more affectionate and playful with me, but this time, her flirtatious behavior was directed elsewhere. Watching her dance with Daniel, of all people, was hard enough, but what happened next completely broke me. She kissed him. Right there, in front of everyone. My heart dropped. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was seeing. The humiliation and anger bubbled up inside me as I watched them, their actions growing bolder. They returned to the table, and things escalated. I saw her kiss him again, this time more passionately, while his hands roamed over her. Under the table, her hand moved toward him in a way that left no doubt about what was happening. I felt my fury reach its peak, and for a split second, I thought about confronting them, causing a scene, and putting a stop to it all. But then, my dad's words echoed in my mind, "Respect yourself, son. Don't let anyone treat you like less than you're worth." That's when it hit me, this marriage was over. Sophia wasn't mine anymore, and I wasn't going to fight for someone who didn't value me. Keeping my composure, I pulled out my phone. I zoomed in, took a series of clear photos, and recorded a short video of their intimate moment. Then I typed out a message and hit send. Guess what, sweetheart? My meeting got rescheduled, and I'm back early. Looks like you're in good hands tonight. I'll head home, assuming you'll be staying the night with Dr. Daniel Walker. Now I get why you've been ignoring my calls and texts. Have fun, and cheers to the end of our marriage. I'll be gone by the time you come back tomorrow. I stayed where I was, calmly watching, curious to see how she'd react. Moments later, her phone lit up. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and started tapping. I knew she was reading my message. Her demeanor changed instantly. The drunken, carefree look vanished, replaced by something much more serious. For the first time that night, Sophia sobered up completely. The moment I saw Sophia's reaction, I turned on my heel and walked straight to my car. As I reached it, I heard her yelling, William, please wait. Her voice cracked with desperation, but I didn't stop. I shot her a cold look, shook my head in disappointment, and got in. Before she could catch up, I started the engine and drove off, leaving her behind in the dust of her own choices. My phone immediately lit up with calls and texts, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I was too angry, too hurt, to hear whatever excuses she thought would justify her actions. If she wanted to go running back to her ex after all these years, that was her choice. Seeing them together like that, so comfortable, so intimate, left no doubt in my mind that we were done. It had been 22 years since she left him, and yet here she was, throwing away everything we'd built together to crawl back to him. I thought about how she'd have to explain this to her family, to our kids. That mess was on her now, not me. The texts kept rolling in. William, please come back. I need to explain. It's not what you think. I love you. Please come back. Damn it, William. Let me explain. But I couldn't bring myself to care. After 2 grueling days of travel, being ignored by her, enduring her cold attitude, and then seeing her with Daniel, I was done. The betrayal stung too much. I didn't want to hear her out or listen to any explanations. There was no excuse for what I'd seen. After ignoring about 20 calls and texts, I finally stopped and fired off a single reply. Forget you. My life is just fine. I've got a great job, my kids are thriving, and everything's paid off. I still have enough years left to start fresh. Goodbye. By then, I'd been driving for 4 hours of my 7-hour trip back to Louisville, so I pulled into a roadside diner to grab some breakfast and clear my head. Over a plate of eggs and bacon, I decided to share my thoughts with the world. Back then, Facebook was the place for venting life updates. Between bites, I updated my relationship status from happily married to single and available. Then, I posted the pictures I'd taken of Sophia and Daniel. The first showed them locked in a passionate kiss at the wedding. The second? His hand was unmistakably on her chest. Below the photos, I wrote. Looks like Sophia's upgrading and reuniting with her ex-husband, Dr. Daniel Walker. Meanwhile, I'm back on the dating scene. Here's to new beginnings. It might have been a bit immature, but it was the truth. I was done playing the fool. I was moving forward, no matter how much it hurt. And honestly, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Daniel was nearly 50, balding, overweight, and, by no stretch of the imagination, an upgrade. Why would she throw away our life together for him, a man who'd already cheated on her once? Maybe the title of doctor held more appeal than accountant. Whatever her reasons, they didn't matter. I was angry, hurt, and, in a strange way, slightly amused. She was throwing away a 19-year marriage for a guy who'd betrayed her more than 2 decades ago. Good luck to them both. They deserved each other. For me, it came down to this: either my partner is fully committed to me, or she's free to be with someone else. There's no middle ground in my book. People make choices, and Sophia made hers. After finishing breakfast and taking a quick 2-hour nap in my car, I got back on the road and pulled into my driveway just as the clock hit 7 a.m. When I turned on my phone, it nearly exploded with notifications. Messages flooded in from Sophia, her parents, her sister, and even her friends. Within minutes, the phone rang, and her name flashed on the screen. I couldn't help but wonder if she'd spent the night tossing and turning, or if she'd spent it with Daniel. Either way, I ignored her call. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses anymore. My focus was on getting what I needed from the house and moving on. Her family had always been good to me, so when her dad, Charles, called that morning, I picked up. He deserved an explanation. Charles, I said, keeping my voice steady, I had no idea Sophia was unhappy in our marriage. But after what I saw last night, it's clear where her heart is. The disrespect she showed me in front of everyone we know is something I can't forgive. If she still has feelings for Daniel, she's free to be with him. I'm going to find someone who values me and stays faithful. I've got no other choice. I'll be moving out today, and I'll put the house on the market soon." Charles sighed heavily, and I could feel his disappointment, but he didn't argue. He understood. The next morning, I planned to contact a lawyer and start the divorce process. Sophia could stay in the house until it's sold, and I'd ensure everything was handled fairly. Call me old-fashioned, but I wasn't about to share a home with someone who clearly wanted to be with someone else. She'd made her choice, though I couldn't help but think it was a foolish one. About an hour later, Charles showed up. He looked concerned, maybe even heartbroken, and pleaded with me to hold off on making any drastic decisions. "At least talk to her," he urged. "Let her explain herself." But I just shook my head and pointed at the photos again, the ones that showed Sophia and Daniel openly groping each other at the wedding. "Explain what?" I asked. "This is what she did, right in front of everyone. There's no justification for it." Charles sighed heavily, clearly disappointed, but he didn't argue much after that. I could see that even he couldn't defend her actions. When I stepped back into what used to be our home, a wave of sadness hit me like a freight train. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked around, realizing that what had once been our happy place was now just an empty shell of our broken marriage. Over the past 5 years, we had poured our hearts into making this house our dream home. Back when mortgage rates were ridiculously low, under 2.99%, I refinanced it to its full value, pulling out nearly $500,000 in equity. Out of that money, I set up $200,000 in trust funds for Brooke and Avery's college education, with a little extra to help them get started in life. Another $100,000 went into upgrading the house, turning it into a place we truly loved. Despite pulling out all that equity, our monthly mortgage payment only went up by $700 thanks to the lower interest rate. It was a no-brainer financially. Sophia had even gone back to work as a receptionist to cover the additional cost, and everything had worked out perfectly. My salary as an accountant was decent, nothing flashy, but things were looking even brighter now that I'd been promoted to CFO. Next year, I was set to receive stock options as part of my compensation package. Those options were tied to the merger, and if everything went as planned, I'd be granted 40,000 shares. It would take a few years before I could cash them out, but with projections showing the stock hitting $100 per share, it was a retirement plan worth waiting for. Sophia never showed much interest in our finances. As long as her needs were met and she enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, she left the details to me. I tried explaining the stock options to her a few times, but she never paid much attention. That never bothered me. I was happy enough planning for our future and looking forward to enjoying it with her. But now, with the merger delayed and my marriage falling apart, those stock options were a silver lining. They wouldn't be factored into the divorce settlement since they weren't officially granted yet. Our assets were modest, only about $50,000 in savings, and we'd split whatever proceeds came from selling the house. But with it being heavily mortgaged, there wouldn't be much left to divide. At 44, Sophia would walk away with her car and about $25,000. If she'd stayed faithful, she could have had so much more: a loving husband, a stable future, and a secure retirement. Instead, she chose betrayal, and now all I wanted was closure. I wanted her to fully grasp the magnitude of what she had lost. Seeing Daniel after all these years stirred up a lot of memories, both good and bad. Sophia had told me plenty about their past, how they'd had a decent relationship until his infidelity destroyed it. She'd been close to him, sure, but from everything she'd shared, I'd always believed I was the one who truly mattered to her. I was her second chance, her better match. I was her husband of 19 years, the one she'd built a life with. I was confident in my looks, my dedication, and the love we'd shared. Yet somehow, there she was, letting Daniel kiss her, hold her, and touch her like none of that mattered. Maybe she'd had too much to drink. Maybe she was upset that I wasn't there. But deep down, she knew it was wrong, and she still went through with it. She didn't stop herself, even when she should've. Maybe, in some twisted way, Daniel still felt like a good fit to her, like an old, familiar comfort. Maybe she thought a little harmless flirting wouldn't cause any real damage. But it wasn't harmless, not to me, not to our marriage, and certainly not to the life we'd built together. After all, Daniel was single now, and I hadn't adjusted my schedule to join Sophia at this important wedding. In her mind, she deserved to let loose and have a little fun. When Daniel kissed her again, she allowed herself to feel happy. His kiss brought back memories of their past, and as they danced together in a quiet corner, she convinced herself that a little flirting and physical closeness couldn't hurt. Everyone else at the wedding seemed to be enjoying themselves, so why shouldn't she? She told herself she'd make things right with me later. Then her phone buzzed. She assumed it was me checking in, but when she opened the message, her heart sank. It was from me, and it was clear I'd been there. Panic set in instantly. She knew she was in trouble. She scanned the crowd, trying to spot me, but I was already on my way out. The thought of losing me hit her hard, and she realized she had to explain herself before it was too late. In a rush of anxiety, she made a quick excuse to Daniel about needing to use the ladies' room and hurried out of the reception. Her heart raced as she headed for the exit, her high heels clattering against the floor. She spotted the door swinging shut and knew I was leaving. Bursting through the doors, she saw me walking to my car. "William, please wait," she called out, her voice trembling. But I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. Without a word, I got into my car and drove away, leaving her standing there, desperate and alone. She tried to follow me, but it was already too late. My car disappeared down the road as she stood frozen, realizing the gravity of what she'd done. When she got back inside, her panic turned to devastation. She sent text after text, call after call, but I didn't answer. She knew why I was ignoring her. After sending me at least 10 more messages, I finally responded with a single, cutting text. "Forget you." Later, 2 of her friends found her outside, kneeling on the cold ground, trying to piece together everything that had happened. They were shocked by her actions and worried about the future of our marriage. They knew me well enough to understand that I wasn't someone who would let this go without consequences. The next morning, back in Louisville at 10 a.m., I was packing up my belongings. Sitting at the kitchen table, I sipped what would be my last cup of coffee in the house we'd built together. The emotions were overwhelming, a mix of sadness, anger, and regret. When I finished, I rinsed the cup, left it in the sink, and scribbled a short note for Sophia. In it, I told her not to call me and said we'd only speak once the divorce papers were ready. I didn't bother signing it. Instead, I left my wedding ring on top of the note as a final statement. Before walking out of the house for good, I grabbed my laptop, transferred half of our savings to her account, and canceled our joint credit card after paying off the balance. From that moment on, she'd be responsible for herself. If she decided to contest the divorce, she'd have to manage the mortgage and bills on her own, a nearly impossible task without my income. But the house would sell quickly at the right price. If she cooperated, we could end things swiftly, and she could return to Daniel. As I drove away from what had once been my sanctuary, I felt like I was entering an unfamiliar, darker world. It was a heavy realization that my life, as I had known it, was over. Later, I heard from mutual friends who were at the wedding. They told me Sophia was a wreck after I left. She couldn't stop crying, drinking herself into oblivion until she eventually passed out from sheer exhaustion. Her friends, who were both concerned and regretful on her behalf, tried reaching me with calls and texts, pleading for me to come back and salvage the situation. They eventually got her back to her hotel room, helped her into bed, and checked on her throughout the night. The next morning, when she woke up, reality hit her like a freight train. She understood the full extent of what had happened and immediately tried calling me, begging for a chance to explain and asking for forgiveness. But after witnessing her actions firsthand, I was done. I ignored every call and text she sent. That Sunday morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and the crushing weight of impending divorce hanging over me. By noon, I was on a flight back home. My dad picked me up at the airport, but I learned later that Sophia had called him, asking for his help because I refused to pick her up myself. From the way my dad looked at me when I arrived, I must have been a mess. He didn't ask questions, though. He just drove me home. My dad had always been my rock, so when I saw him, I broke down completely, sobbing into his shoulder. "Daddy, I messed up," I cried. "I think Williams really left me." He held me gently, his expression heavy with sadness. "I talked to him this morning," he said softly. "It doesn't sound promising." "Sophia, what were you thinking? And with Daniel of all people?" I wiped my tears and shook my head, unable to meet his eyes. "I don't know, Dad. I was drunk and so mad at William for not coming to the wedding. I made a mistake, but I didn't sleep with him. I just need William to forgive me." Dad sighed deeply, his disappointment evident. "Sweetheart, from the pictures I saw, it might as well have been the same. You know William, he's not the forgiving type when it comes to something like this. To him, that's betrayal, plain and simple." When I got home later that day, I clung to a fragile hope that William might be waiting for me. But deep down, I knew he was gone. The empty silence of the house felt crushing. I spent the entire day crying, trying to call him over and over, desperate to apologize. The irony hit me hard. I had made the same mistake with Daniel that William had warned me about so many times. Now, the man I truly loved seemed to have vanished overnight. My heart shattered when I saw his wedding ring sitting on the table next to a short note. There wasn't much written, but it was clear, he was done. Meanwhile, I had relocated to the company condo, which was usually reserved for visiting clients. Since it wasn't in use, I spoke with my CEO, George, who approved my stay there. George was more than just my boss. He was a friend who'd gone through something similar years ago. He even suggested I hold off on receiving this year's stock options to strengthen my position during the divorce negotiations. It was practical advice, and I took it to heart. The next day, I returned to my office on the 16th floor, knowing Sophia wouldn't be able to get past security. I'd already informed the team that if she tried to visit, they were to escort her out politely but firmly. Sure enough, when she came by on Monday, she quickly realized she wouldn't get to see me. Despite her persistence, I was determined to maintain no contact. She didn't know where I was staying, couldn't reach me by phone, and now couldn't confront me at work. Feeling isolated, regretful, and overwhelmed by what she'd done, Sophia was left to sit with the consequences of her actions. Amidst the chaos, my daughters, Brooke and Avery, reached out to me in a panic. They urged me to speak with their mom, clearly upset by what was happening. I stayed calm as I explained my perspective. "Your mother made her choice," I told them firmly. "What she did was a betrayal, and I take trust very seriously. If you want to build strong relationships in the future, you need to understand how important it is to respect your partner. Betrayal has consequences, and many people won't tolerate being treated that way." They seemed to understand my stance, though I could tell it wasn't easy for them. I reassured them that no matter what, I would always be their dad, and I wanted them to remain a big part of my life. Around this time, I shared a post on Facebook explaining what had happened. The reaction was overwhelming. Friends and family called non-stop, trying to figure out what was going on. But something unexpected happened too. I suddenly became quite popular with women. For the first time in years, I found myself going out on dates with younger, energetic women who brought excitement back into my life. The constant complaints and negativity I'd endured with Sophia were replaced by laughter, affectionate text messages, and fun, carefree evenings. It felt like I was rediscovering a part of myself I'd lost over the years. About a month after I made that post, I met Lily. From the very first date, we clicked. She was warm, supportive, and full of life. We quickly became a couple, and when my divorce with Sophia was finalized, Lily and I started building a future together. She would later become my wife and the partner I'd been searching for all along. Sophia, on the other hand, wasn't happy when she learned about my new life. She was angry, mostly at herself, but also jealous and bitter that I hadn't given her a second chance before moving on. But by then, it didn't matter anymore. My life was heading in a new direction, and there was no turning back. I refused every attempt Sophia made to meet with me, choosing to deal with her solely through our lawyers. Eventually, we sold the house, and after covering the real estate agent's fees and other costs, there wasn't much left, just under $11,000 in equity. I decided Sophia should have that small amount. It felt like the least I could do to give her a fresh start, even though I owed her nothing more. Her lawyers pushed hard for a share of my future earnings, but the court ruled in my favor. Settlements, they argued, couldn't be based on speculative income. Instead, they calculated my obligations based on my average earnings at the time. Since Sophia was employed, paying alimony wasn't going to be a significant financial burden. In the end, I agreed to pay her $2,000 a month for 2 years. It wasn't much, but it would give her enough time to stand on her own, or to find someone else to lean on. It was clear that someone wouldn't be me. In the years that followed, Sophia and I never spoke directly. All communication went through our attorneys. She eventually moved to Milwaukee, where she joined a support group and, unsurprisingly, began living with Dr. Daniel Walker. From what I heard, she wasn't the same lively and happy person she had been during our marriage. The consequences of her actions had caught up with her. Anger and selfishness had driven her poor choices, and she'd paid the price. She acted as though our marriage didn't matter, as if she were single again, and by the time she realized the damage, it was far too late. 3 years later, at our daughter's college graduation, Sophia met my new wife, Lily. Lily was 28, radiant, and pregnant with our second child. I held our 1-year-old daughter, Scarlett, in my arms as we approached the group. Sophia, now 47, looked noticeably older. Time and regret had taken their toll. Daniel had accompanied her but lingered in the background, clearly aware of the situation's sensitivity. At some point during the celebration, Sophia found a moment to speak with me alone. Her voice was soft, and her words carried the weight of regret. She apologized sincerely, admitting she had made a terrible mistake that cost her the life we could have continued to build together. I risked everything we had for nothing, she confessed, her eyes glistening with tears. I took a deep breath, keeping my tone calm but firm. Sophia, I've forgiven you, I said. I never imagined I'd find you in someone else's arms, but I'm grateful for the good times we shared. You gave me 2 incredible daughters, and for that, I'll always be thankful. But your choices led me to Lily and the family we've built together. That's helped me move past the anger. I advised her to focus on the future, encouraging her to let go of the past. I hope we can continue to see each other at family events and be civil for our daughters, I added sincerely. At that moment, Lily walked over, holding Scarlett in her arms. I introduced the two of them. The contrast between Lily and Sophia was striking. At 47, Sophia looked like she could have been Lily's mother. I saw the realization flash across her face, a painful reminder of what she had lost. One night of anger and selfishness had cost her the life she once cherished. Over the next decade, our paths crossed a handful of times at family gatherings, particularly at our daughters' weddings. Sophia never remarried but remained with Daniel, who, by all accounts, was kind to her. Yet, I could tell that seeing me with Lily and our growing family stirred up bittersweet memories for her. The happiness we had once shared was now just a distant memory, a shadow of what could have been. In a twist of fate, that summer, I bought back our old family home when it came back on the market. By then, I had cashed in my stock options, which had performed better than I could have hoped. Reclaiming the house filled with so many cherished memories felt like closing a chapter and starting a new one. My family and friends, Sophia excluded, were thrilled to see the home back in our hands. Brooke and Avery especially loved visiting the house, walking through the rooms where they had grown up, laughing as they reminisced about their childhood. It was heartwarming to see those happy memories come alive again. Sophia's choice to take a different path meant she missed out on the future we had dreamed of together. She would have loved continuing the life we'd built, but life moves on. I've found joy in creating new memories with Lily and our daughters, and I've learned a valuable lesson along the way. Before you choose to hurt someone, be sure you'll never need them again.